Good evening, Kenya. How are you doing tonight? I certainly hope you're doing better than before. My name is Victor Muyakane, and this is the Daily Report on Thursday, alongside Catherine Simaloy on Sign Language. Here is a glimpse of what we have in store for you this evening. Tonight, the court gives a green light to the deployment of the military in the streets of Nairobi on a day the Kenya Defence Forces officers were seen patrolling city streets hours before the ruling. Legislators who voted for the finance bill make an about turn a day after President William Ruto declined to sign the bill and returned it to Parliament.
Na kama kuna njia ambayo tulikosea, sisi ambao tulipiga yes, tunaomba msamaha.
As the 7 days of protests conclude Thursday, we examine the protests' impact on the country's political landscape.
So these great grunge, if they have the Mau Mau spirit in them, you can see so whatever happens, we are not going to tolerate this. So it's a new phenomenon that few people expected it.
Now, just before we begin, I'd like to call upon you to let us know where you're watching from and let us know your views and reviews on the news that we're about to present to you, including the conversation we're going to have later on Insight tonight, with two gentlemen trying to decipher, trying to understand what's happening with our country, a state of the nation conversation, so to speak. We invite you to be part of that, all that and more later on. But we begin with the latest news tonight. The government deployed the Kenya Defence Forces to help quell the anti-finance bill protests. This happening even after Kenyans went to court questioning the procedure used to send soldiers to maintain law and order. Moige Williams spent the day trailing the officers who spent the better part of the day patrolling the streets of Nairobi. Take a look.
After Tuesday's mayhem and chaos, Parliament hurriedly on Thursday approved the deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces to maintain law and order. And at dawn, the military men were ready, just in case. They patrolled the streets of Nairobi, first the outskirts of Nairobi, then snaked through Uhuru Highway to Wayakiwe and to the James Gishuru interchange. The officers then went back to University Way through the Globe Round before making an entry into the Central Business District. Though pockets of demonstrators were busy engaging anti-riot police officers, the situation changed when the soldiers arrived. Cheers here and jeers there, the soldiers remaining calm through the entire 10 minutes patrol. Things changed the moment the last military vehicle made an appearance at Tomboy Street and the dramatic cat and mouse chase between anti-riot police and protesters started once again. The presence of Kenya Defence Forces officers within the capital city brought a different during the protest, but the question that lingers is, will the situation remain the same? Moige William, TV47, Nairobi.
Tonight, two families are seeking justice after their kin tragically lost their lives during the Anti-Finance Bill 2024 demonstrations. As Chichi Josephine reports, relatives of the deceased are now calling on the government to take action against those responsible for the deaths.
The family of Emmanuel Giggs Tata, a second-year student at the Meru National University, claims he lost his life after inhaling tear gas lobbed by the anti-riot police officers who are trying to disperse protesters at the Mwembetea bus station. Tata's father, Paul Tata, who works in Mombasa, says his son was not participating in the protest.
Alikuwa ni mwanafunzi wa Meru National University. Alipigwa na tear gas hapa Mwembetea Mombasa. Kisha nikaitwa kazini, nikifika hapo tukimpeleka hospitali, akawa shakata roho. Naomba tu ni justice kwa mtoto wangu kijana. Sababu ndio mtoto pekee, ndio kijana pekee yake kwangu, na watoto wawili na ndio first born. Na in fact alikuwa huku akija kuchukua fees ndio walikuwa wamekuja Mombasa.
In Kakamega, the family of a woman who was shot by a police officer during protest against the 2024 finance bill in Kakamega on Tuesday is also calling on the government to investigate the killing.
Ninalia, naomboleza mtoto wangu. Alikuwa amekuja kuchukua lunch. Huyo ni mchukuu wangu, ananiita shosh. Alikuwa amekuja kuchukua lunch, badala ya kurudi nyumbani wanampea risasi. Tujui ni kwa nini.
The family of the 35-year-old businesswoman claims she was shot on her way home from the market where she works as a vegetable vendor.
Sijawahi ona Kenya kitu ambayo imetendeka hapa Kakamega. Sababu sijawahi sikia kwamba mwanamke ameuawa kwa sababu ya maandamano. Sisi wa mama tu kufanya maandamano. Maandamano ilikuwa ya vijana.
The two now join the growing list of Kenyans killed by police officers during this week's protests.
Ni kwa nini serikali imenyamaza haiongei?
Chichi, Josephine, TV47.
Now, the recent demonstrations by Generation Z are likely to serve as a significant lesson for President William Ruto, as they highlighted the need for effective government operations. The protests stemmed from a perceived lack of trust in the government institutions and their performance. According to Professor Macharia Munene, such a level of demonstration has not been witnessed since the late President Moi's administration back in 1992. Paul Kirobi with more.
Nearly 42 years after Kenya witnessed a coup d'etat attempt by the Air Force, analysts now aver that Generation Z is deeply dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. According to Professor Macharia Munene, this generation shaped by the digital era and free education initiated by the late President Mwai Kibaki.
So you have a combination of educational exposure, good exposure, and cyber exposure. So you combine the two forces. Since they are thinkers, these young people are thinkers. They are not docile. And see, when they see something going wrong, they have capacity to act using their brains.
The president's decision to deploy the military instead of the General Service Unit GSU to assist police in combating the protest is seen as a critical misstep.
It implies that even the president has lost faith or trust or confidence in the police. That's what it means. So if they are not capable of doing their work, you've lost faith in them, trust in them. There are a few things that may need to be done. You need to reorganize the top of the police.
Professor Munene argues that government was aware of the public's discontent but failed to address it due to poor advice, ignoring warning signs like the doctor's strike.
So it's a new phenomenon that few people expected it. But the signs and the warnings were there. When you display contradictions, extravagance, wastage of public wealth, and then say there is no money to do basic things, to even deal with the doctors. The hospitals need doctors, and there are thousands of doctors without jobs.
What has left many tongue wagging is that the demonstrations are not politically fueled, with no central character in what the professor says is making them harder to manipulate by politicians. The professor avers that if the president fails to address critical issues like corruption, misuse of public resources, and bad governance, especially at the county level, he faces a major crisis ahead. Hundreds of youth were yesterday marching along the Thika Superhighway all the way to Nairobi's central business district just to show displeasure with President William Ruto's government. Paul Kirobi, TV47, Thika Superhighway, Nairobi.
Now, a day after President William Ruto surrendered to public pressure and announced the withdrawal of the controversial Finance Bill 2024, Kenyans from several parts of the country, including Nairobi, came out in large numbers in another day of demonstrations against the government. The push started with calls to have the bill withdrawn in its entirety. But Thursday protests took a new twist, with Kenyans saying that there were more issues that needed to be addressed. Mike Kagongo with the details.
Downtown Nairobi, businesses remained closed as traders stayed away due to the planned protests. And despite President William Ruto announcing plans to withdraw controversial finance bill, Kenyans still came out to protest. The tune had, however, changed this time.
The bill, the abductions, everything is done up to now. He didn't even apologize. 275 people were killed in Githurai. You're not even safe in your homes.
Ruto ameshuka, sasa atoke. Ndio tunataka.
This time round, the police were well prepared, frustrating every effort made by protesters to make a move in their planned march to the State House or Parliament, from Parliament buildings to Uhuru Highway. Police using water cannons and tear gas canisters to disperse the protesters. And as protesters were engaging the police, human rights activists were appealing for blood donations to help those injured in the demonstrations. Mike Kagwango, TV47, Nairobi.
Kenyans have still expressed their disappointment in the 13th Parliament after some parliamentarians passed the contentious Finance Bill 2024, which was later withdrawn by the President. And now a section of legislators have called for the dissolution of the 13th Parliament for failing its people. Elizabeth Atieno now reports.
The 13th Parliament is now in an indeterminate state. Enraged Kenyans are now demanding for some MPs to step down for voting in favor of the 2024 Finance Bill, which was later withdrawn by the President on Wednesday this week.
The President needs to find a way of calming the country and restoring confidence in the institutions of state. Because right now it is very low, and it should not be that low.
It has now emerged that the call for dissolution of the 13th Parliament has equally been supported by a section of legislators, including Nyaribari Masaba MP Daniel Manduku, who wants President William Ruto to dissolve Parliament as per Section 261, Sub-Article 7 of the Constitution.
I want to state here that as elected leaders, we are the problem. And I want to ask the President to immediately dissolve the National Assembly and call for elections within 90 days.
Manduku expressed his displeasure on the chaos witnessed on Tuesday this week, where protesters stormed Parliament buildings, which, according to him, is a clear indication that Kenyans have lost faith in the elected lawmakers. Sentiments echoed by Homa Bay woman representative Joyce Bensouda.
What we saw on Tuesday is that the public came to take back their power. And it is time we called a spade a spade. I want to ask Kenyans not to allow their members of parliament to go back to parliament.
I'm from Namibia, where we were moving smoothly. I came here knowing very well that debate on finance bill was going to run 2 weeks. What was the rush? A question to ask. What is it that leaders cannot be honest? The 13th Parliament is not being truthful as to why we were elected.
Manduku now says the government could seek assistance from the international community to organize snap polls.
We can ask the AU, that is African Union, the East African Community, or the UN, to send 9 commissioners to oversee the elections.
An almost similar situation was witnessed during the 2023 Finance Bill, where Mwingi West MP Charles Nguna revealed that the 13th Parliament has betrayed Kenyans who elected them.
Sisi wabunge tunakula pesa bure. Hakuna kitu tunaweza saidia wa Kenya kwa sasa.
That is really dangerous, Mheshimiwa.
Hakuna haja ya kuwa na bunge Kenya.
This is not the first time the Kenyan Parliament is facing a possible dissolution. In 2021, the then Chief Justice David Maraga advised President Uhuru Kenyatta to dissolve Parliament over its failure to enact the 2/3 gender rule. Justice Maraga received 6 petitions calling for the House dissolution, a move that could have rendered 418 lawmakers jobless. Elizabeth Atieno, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, sort of like a follow-up to that story that you just heard, Leaders from various regions and those who voted for the finance bill continue to face difficulties in interacting with their constituents in the grassroots areas. This is after voting in favor of the bill. Many are now stepping forward through the media and other social media platforms to apologize after disregarding the voices of their people regarding the bill. Ruga Ival with the details.
The soaring relationship between leaders and their constituents reached a peak on Tuesday when members of parliament voted that day to pass the contentious Finance Bill 2024 amidst protests in the country. This creating a great disconnect with some MPs finding it hard to interact with their voters. Some are already seeking forgiveness, either through social media platforms or in public meetings, trying to explain why they had to pass the bill. The first to display remorse was Dagoretti South John Kerry, who had a week ago dismissed photos of the crowds demonstrating as digitally altered photos. Taking to his X account, the MP said, and I quote, "I truly apologize for the comments I made regarding the protest and the authenticity of certain images in the heat of the moment during the debate on the finance bill. My words were unnecessary, misguided and insensitive." End of quote. Turkana Central MP Joseph Namwar also addressed the issue, explaining his position.
Kwanza kabisa ni kushukuru rais wetu kwa kuamua kurudisha Finance Bill 2024, kuirudisha kwenye bunge liwezwe kujadiliwa tena. Na kama kuna njia ambayo tulikosea, sisi ambao tulipiga yes, tunaomba msamaha.
Gideon Kimayo, South MP, also took to his socials to say sorry, and I quote, "The nation is bigger than me or anyone else. After our parliamentary group meeting today, we've agreed to withdraw the finance bill. The 200 billion we were looking for in the finance bill should not make us lose our country. I apologize to all KO South people for voting yes to the finance bill. Going into the future, I promise to listen more to Sauti ya Mwananchi." End of quote. The issue of displaying opulence that Kenyans had raised also led to Senate Majority Leader Aaron Cheriot to defend his lifestyle.
Hiyo kiatu haipiti hata 15,000. Tulikuwa juzi trip the one we had gone to the US. Nikaingia kwa Kamola hapo nilipata hiyo kiatu, I think ilikuwa $100. Hata naweza toa receipt ya kiatu nilinunua. Hiyo brand wanasema jana ndio nimejua kuna such a brand. I have never known. Mimi suppliers wangu kiatu jeans ni vijana grow up nao mtaani, na naweza wapatia paka namba, wananileteanga vitu zangu na niwasalimia. Mmoja anaitwa Polosa, mwingine anaitwa Wile, unaona. So hiyo mambo ya flash live message, mimi ni mtu wa mtaani, hiyo wasiniwekelee hiyo maneno.
A section of leaders also had a hard time to interact with Kenyans who accused them of being ignorant to pertinent issues affecting them. Ruga Ival, TV47.
Right. Who supplies your shoes? Good question there. Listen, the National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula has confirmed that he has received a memorandum from the President detailing his reservations on the finance bill. And as Elizabeth Mutuku now reports, the Finance Committee will now guide members on the process to be followed to delete all the 69 clauses in the bill. This is after the House reconvenes after a short recess.
Just a day after President William Ruto announced that he will not assent to the Finance Bill 2024,
I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill, and it shall subsequently be withdrawn, and I have agreed with these members that that becomes our collective position.
National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula has notified National Assembly members of the reasons the President rejected the bill and his reservations. According to Wetangula, in accordance to Article 115, Section 1B of the Constitution, the President referred the Finance Bill 2024 back to the National Assembly for reconsideration with reservations, recommending deletion of all clauses of the bill. The Speaker, in communication to members, says the President's memorandum constitution a rejection of the bill in its entirety after the public expressed reservations. Wetangula has now directed National Assembly Finance and Planning Committee to promptly begin reviewing President's memorandum along with concerns and recommendations and submit a report to the House at its next regular session upon reconvening. According to Clause 6 of the Constitution, if the President refuses to sign a bill and fails to return it to Parliament within 14 days, the bill will be considered a law. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47, Nairobi.
Residents of different parts of the country woke up today to a shock after the streets were filled by armed police. However, in some areas, protesters did not let fear hold them back, and rather they marched out in numbers to demonstrate and demand better governance in the country. Meanwhile, 2 people, including a child, were shot dead in Ongata Rongai in Kajiado County. This is during the anti-government protests. This as 19 others sustained gunshot injuries across the country.
Residents woke up in shock after the police infiltrated their streets. As if this could stop them from protesting, this is a picture cue of how areas like Eldoret, Machakos, Mombasa, Nakuru, people marched in numbers with the urge of practicing their democratic rights.
Faith in President Ruto. He can't tell us that he's now withdrawing and apologizing, and people have been killed. People have been maimed. We have families who are now distraught. Their livelihoods have been destroyed. Their lives have been destroyed. Infrastructure has been destroyed. You can't tell us now that it is when you now want to solve it.
Haukutia sahihi hiyo finance bill. Na sisi tunajua vizuri sana. After 21 days, it shall automatically become a law. Sisi si wajinga. Kama umemaanisha kabisa unataka hiyo bill isifanye kazi, sema umetupilia mbali hiyo bill.
With the hopes for a peaceful demonstration, the situation became dire in Homa Bay County after a misunderstanding between the police and the protesters where 11 people were severely injured.
As of now, we've received 8 patients. All of them 6 of them gunshot wounds. There are 2 who said they were pushed and a motorbike ran over them. But even as we speak, I have just been called to dispatch an ambulance to pick 3 other people who have also been injured.
In Mombasa County, the protests seemed peaceful, only for people to start vandalizing properties.
When you want to join saizi, we are seeing things that we do not want to see as the peaceful youths of this county. We do not want kuna watu wametujoin sijui wametumwa na kina nani that are trying to cause chaos. Do not associate that with us as the youth who started this from day one.
However, counties like Embu were peaceful after the police dispersed the protesters using tear gas. Anastasia Mkabi, TV47.
Now, Baringo-nominated Senator Bishop Jackson Kosgei has recounted the events that took place in Parliament on Tuesday when chaos erupted during the anti-finance bill protests. Bishop Kosgei was left alone while other legislators fled, leaving the legislator, who is a person living with a disability, behind. Take a look.
Well, my experience that I had with them is that they, although in the midst of expression of anger, they expressed human face. Because when they came in, they said, Mzee, we know you where you voted, and we know you are so and so, we know you, but we know you as a good man. But we want, so they said the question of where you voted and so on is not an issue. The question is you. Now that one tells is a human being. And they said, we want to help you out because what might happen here may not be good for you. So then they walked us out with an honorable colleague called Rose Museu. And we came out, that is why they escorted us out. I saw there our children and the anger that came in, I only pray that it is not hijacked by anything else. But it is genuine, they need to be listened to. And that's why the president took a step and listened to them and stepped down. on that issue.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was just looking at that video myself. Clearly, there's some important questions that are being raised there by the nominated member of parliament there. And kudos to the team, the young people that actually stopped the protests and helped him and others out of parliament before things proceeded. At this point, I'd like to urge you to let us know where you're watching us from. The message, the SMS line is on your screen. The WhatsApp number is also on your screen. Let us know what you think about the progress or the process so far. Send us your questions, your key questions about what's next. And our experts, the panel that we're having in studio tonight in a few minutes, will be happy to tackle some of those, right? And I'll be happy to extend, or rather, read those questions to them. Let's proceed. The National Council of Churches of Kenya has called upon the President to fast-track the process of reconstituting the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that is IEBC, in order to ease the process of recalling members of Parliament who have gone contrary to their constituents' wish. Speaking in Jumuiya conference in Limuru, the council also urged President William Ruto to de-gazette the deployment of KDF against peaceful protesters in order to avert more deaths and brutality as witnessed earlier this week during the protests.
Institute the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission. To secure the electoral future of our nation, we urge His Excellency President William Ruto and concerned stakeholders to hear the cry of the people of Kenya and facilitate the completion of the process to appoint the IEBC commissioners. Kenyans in constituencies and wards that have been unable to hold by-elections are suffering injustices, and the boundaries review process is yet to be done. This process must be completed without further delay. Especially of concern to us that despite a court order, the military has been deployed in different parts of Nairobi today. We demand that the government commits to obey the law.
Folks, we want to take a short break. When we come back, we will have a few more stories and then we go to that discussion I alluded to earlier. Once again, I ask you to interact with us on our socials. On X, my handle is @Muyakane, just as I'm saying it, it's phonetically, @Muyakane, at TV47 News. And of course, on TV47 Digital, we'll be able to interact with you on those platforms. The SMS line is on your screen. The WhatsApp line is going to be on your screen. Send in your questions, send in your comments. And once again, I'll be happy to sample them. We'll be right back.
Kila kiongozi ana hadithi yake ya kipekee.
Wazazi wangu walikuwa bit strict kwa sababu mamangu mwenyewe, mimi kutoka kuzaliwa sijailala nje.
The white small one, huyo ana sniff gunpowder na risasi na bomb. Alafu huyo mwingine ni ridgeback ana sniff simba.
Even the employees knows that, so when in the boardroom is the chairman, the CEO and the rest of.
At what point are you a wife?
The minute you get to that inside that door, you become now the wife.
Na kila maamuzi wanayoyafanya hufichua mengi kuhusu utu wao na uongozi wao.
We see God blessing us, and we now realize the power of giving also has to be rewarded back.
Kupitia kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi, tunakuletea mahojiano ya kusisimua na uchambuzi wa kina kuhusu viongozi wetu.
Pick your core business as the bigger stones. Put them in your diary first. Give priority the bigger things.
Usikose kila Alhamis saa 1:30 jioni.
In a world where challenges are as common as opportunities, there are those who dare to defy the odds. They are the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship isn't just about starting a business. It's about embracing uncertainty, pushing boundaries, and turning dreams into reality.
Hata ambao ni pesa ya kusave, wallahi.
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
The way we run the business is in a very unforgiving way, where every team member has to bring out their best.
So, to all the dreamers, innovators, and risk takers out there, remember, being an entrepreneur isn't just a job, it's a way of life. Join the journey. Become an entrepreneur. The Grind, Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Here on Beyond the Limit, we celebrate the extraordinary achievements of individuals who redefine possibilities. In a journey of resilience and determination, these individuals demonstrate that limitations are merely stepping stones to greatness.
I'm Nancy Njoroge, a mother of 3. I have 2 girls and a boy who is Clinton and who is autistic.
When my heart got healed, I decided to come out to be creating CP awareness, to let other people know that there is such a condition, and people that has it is not that they are witches.
Together, let's go beyond the limit every Saturday at 8 p.m.
Welcome to The Realtor, where we take you on an exciting journey from bare land to dream home. Step 1. Finding the perfect plot. We explore location, size, and potential. Next, construction begins. Witness the foundation being laid, walls rising, and rooms taking shape. Step 3. Electricity matters. We delve into wiring, switches, and smart home tech. Step 4. From paint choices to fixtures, it's all about aesthetics. Step 5. It's time to get the right furniture. Finally, the big day. Time to move in and create memories. Join us.
Good evening. If you're joining us right now, this is the Daily Report, and we're just about to shift to Insight Tonight. But before that, the High Court presiding judge, Lawrence Mugambi, has mandated that the government outline the terms, duration, and areas of engagement for the deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces to address the protesters. Now, this is according to the court that the details must be clearly defined and gazetted within the next 2 days. This ruling comes in response to a case filed by the Law Society of Kenya, which challenged the constitutionality of the KDF deployment. Anne Odida with the details.
Ruling on a petition by the Law Society of Kenya, High Court Judge Lawrence Mugambi directed the government to specify the rules and conditions under which the Kenya Defence Forces will operate, the time period during which the military will be active, and a specification of the geographical locations where the military will be operating. This should be documented and published within the next 2 days.
It's necessary and is hereby directed that the terms of engagement, duration of engagement, areas of engagement be clearly defined and gazetted within the next 2 days to alleviate the public fear that their liberties might be put in jeopardy.
According to Article 241 of the Kenyan Constitution 2010, the Kenya Defence Forces KDF can only be deployed for duties related to defence, emergencies and disaster management within the country. Specifically, such deployment must be authorised by the National Assembly and must adhere to strict procedures and oversight to ensure legality and appropriateness. The court, however, says that the Constitution does not clearly define the meaning of emergency.
What then is the meaning of emergency situations or disaster, which is referred to in Article 241B that the Cabinet Secretary applied? The Constitution is silent on the meaning.
But despite these constitutional stipulations, the government recently deployed the KDF to various regions in the country, prompting the Law Society of Kenya to move to court to challenge the government's decision to deploy the KDF, maintaining that it undermines the people's right to protest.
My lord, the military are there to instill fear, intimidate the people of Kenya, and frustrate the rights of the citizens.
In the petition, LSK says that the deployment of military forces for such domestic purposes was not only unnecessary but also illegal.
His Lordship will realize that the procedure that is provided for the deployment of the military, even to assist the police in anything, was not followed.
This ruling comes at the backdrop of heated debate on the legality of the deployment of KDF to deal with internal security matters. Ann Odida, TV47.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ann Odida. And it's that piece that actually segues into the conversation tonight. And with us to help us discuss this, look at the state of the nation, our two gentlemen. First, we have Elkanah Mogaka. Elkanah is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Karibu sana. And we also have Mr. Newton Hamasi. Newton is a leadership and governance expert. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
First of all, gentlemen, talk to me about where you stand, from where you sit. What did you make of the deployment of the KDF to begin with? Away from the ruling, just right at the moment when the tanks and the armored vehicles were rolling into the capital city. What did you make of that? Starting with you, Mr. Hamasi.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me here, first of all. And, just before I begin, I just want to send my personal condolences to the families that lost their youngful ones in the process of protests. And our hearts go out to them. May they get the strength to overcome this terrible moment. In regards to the deployment of KDF, you know, as a country, there are stretches where some activities might happen and there are decisions that have to be made. In a leadership structure, there's that point when you get and you say, no, this is too much. Because what we noted in the previous protests that have been happening, they have been peaceful, they were well organized, but it got to a point where you saw some hooliganism getting into it, of which, yes, those are opportunist people who thought like they can come and infiltrate the noble journey that the young people, the Gen Z generation, was up to achieve. And because of that, as a president, I believe if anyone will be in his position, will take the drastic decision, because this was a threat to the sovereignty of a country. And the only institution that can help a nation protect that aspect is the KDF. Probably the process was hastened, but as we see it, even the ruling that you have just aired right now, it is not stopping it. It's only that it's giving guidance that the government of the day, or the CS, should continue and give specifications on the mandate and the area of coverage and the duration that the KDF will be outside there to protect the sovereignty of the country. Because as we saw, Parliament being attacked the way it was attacked, Victor, it was a threat to the nation, not only to the institution, but to a nation. Because it got to a point, I believe that we got people who infiltrated the demonstration, and in the wisdom of the head of state, I believe he did the right thing to do that.
All right. Mr. Mogaka, what are your thoughts? The armored vehicles are rolling into the capital city. We're seeing a different kind of weaponry now rolling into the capital city. What are your thoughts at that initial moment?
A number comes to mind, 62. When you are present at home, when you are with the people who are going through whatever they are going through, you can anticipate this kind of a thing happening. You can anticipate how intense the protests or how disenfranchised the people feel. From the time we left COVID-19, which happened to be the worst economic disruption this country has ever felt all the world over, we all looked to find someone who would give us reassurance that after these pandemic lockdowns are over and after the service industry and most other employment opportunities are destroyed, we would find someone who would put us back to work. We chose the one we chose. And as soon as that election ended, in the past 20 months, he has traveled out of this country 62 times. That is one country every week, 3 times a month. He has not been here for the majority of his first round of presidency. How can he understand what the feeling on the ground is when he is busy on every other part of the world except where people were locked in their houses, seated, trying to find a way to eat day by day, and the day that they come out of their houses, the person that they chose to help them maneuver this crisis is nowhere to be found. He and the government that he is with are not connected to the people. People told him they would protest in numbers. The triggers were there. The time bomb was ticking. From the time the lockdowns were lifted, we needed someone who would steer the ship back to survival. He got into presidency, he removed the fuel levy, inflation skyrocketed, he was not here. And by the time he's come back, it is only the overreaction of calling the army, whose work it is to also work outside the country and on the borders, to come back into the country together with him to take back control. This was a time bomb that would have been stopped well before this day happened. And I do not believe that the KDF are the right reaction to show that you are trying to connect with the people who are saying you've not been there for them.
All right. So then there's a question to you. So what then do you make of the ruling this evening by Judge Mugambi?
The judiciary, I'm a lawyer. We are all part of this constitution, the laws that carry us and everything else. The judiciary's job is not to choose sides. The judiciary's job is to take the balance on what is happening on the ground and what action the country and the government has taken and find a middle ground. There was definitely some misactivities that happened on Tuesday. Yes, the court does not agree entirely that the only way this country will operate now is with tanks on the street on a daily basis. They said, fine, to stop the riots or the protests today from leading into a riot, you can have your military for today. You can have them for tomorrow. We will give you time to organize yourselves, come up with a plan, but you cannot indefinitely decide Kenya is now no longer a police state and has become an army state. The work of the judiciary is to look at both sides, find a middle, ask everyone to go back to the table, discuss, and find a way out of the armistice.
Right.
And that is what the justice did today.
Right. Mr. Khamasi, I saw you shaking your head and making faces while you were speaking. Could you tell me what thoughts went through your mind?
You know, Victor, sometimes as a nation, we need to look at things very objectively. Because what I feel is we are at a point where instead of looking at things objectively, we are looking at things with emotions. And when the president makes a decision in time, it is a problem. When the president, like a case in scenario, you saw the case of the finance bill. Yes, there was agitation on the streets. The president acknowledged it. But this particular bill was not on the president's desk. Let us face it. There is law in this country, and he's a lawyer. There is a procedure that is followed. And when it got to his table, he made the wise decision that a president will do. He withdrew the bill, and he sent back the recommendation to the speaker. I have heard people saying, emotionally, throwing words left, right, and center, just to fuel the situation in a country that is already in a mess. You get me? There was young people who demonstrated, and we appreciate the fact that these young people came out and expressed themselves in a very genuine manner. Something that is commendable. But again, if you look on the other side, Now, the case of the finance bill, the president sends it back to Parliament. As a law-abiding country, that was the object of the demonstration from the Generation Z. This particular object, the president has said, I have heard you and I have withdrawn it. And the procedures have to follow to finality. But now you hear...
At this point, just allow me to ask you, at this point, and I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, there are those who feel that perhaps, like he's saying, the signs were there, the writing was on the wall quite early. Why wait until this juncture to respond? And there are those who are saying, including some of the questions that are coming here, is that the president had, the way he was able to whip his MPs around and withdraw all the amendments and basically send the bill back, why wasn't he able to do that, to marshal them to do that earlier?
Victor, let me ask. Can you withdraw something? Can you withdraw something that is not on your table? Remember, the Parliament of Kenya is an independent institution. True or false? Very true, right? So this is a process that started in Parliament. It went through all the processes. And as a country, we have law-abiding leadership. And that is the truth. Let us move away from the sideshows and the pains that we feel and everything. Let us face the law. And this particular document, if the president uttered a word and to say, to command Parliament to withdraw that particular bill before it gets to his table, what will have happened? The same people would have come out to say, look, the president is interfering with the independence of Parliament. Is that the case the president wants to get himself into? No. He acted in a record speed time because he got that particular bill in the morning, and at 4 o'clock, he addressed the nation.
Somebody's asking,
and then another thing, Victor.
Somebody is actually asking you directly. Yes. Somebody called Juicy. He says, are you from this country? Was it necessary for blood to be shed for something to be done? This is a question to you directly.
There was no necessity for blood to be shed. That is unacceptable. And in a democratic country, that is completely unacceptable. But again, as a country, we need to follow the due process. Yes, there is the right to protest. There's no one who has limited that right. That is why on Thursday, on Thursday, when the bill was being debated on the floor of the House, people demonstrated. No one infiltrated the Parliament, and the Parliament did its job. The parliamentarians who have been elected by the people, they voted in that House. Yes, there have been claims of corruption, of bribery, and all those claims. And I believe that those claims are supposed to be taken care of because these are leaders who have been elected by the people, not to represent their own interests. And as a country, I believe it gets to a point where it bounces back to us as voters. Who do we vote for? Do we vote for these leaders who have the substance to represent our ideologies? Because what we have seen, Victor, what is happening in this nation is, I come to the voter with a lot of money, and I tell them, look, vote for me, I'm going to protect you. But when they get to Parliament, they want to recover that money that they were giving you as a voter. So this is a challenge. It bounces back to us as Kenyans, as voters, as the decision makers, because whatever we saw in Parliament is garbage in, garbage out. We vote in bad leaders, we get bad leadership in Parliament.
All right. I see your point. I just want you to put a pin on that for a second. You did say something quite significant, and I want you to pick up on this. We're a law-abiding country, a country that respects and follows the rule of law. So, for the sake of the viewers out there, there's been a lot of questions here. I know people are asking, okay, so what does this mean now? Now that the president has sent it back. I believe the two of you saw the piece that went on air a few minutes ago, and there's one person who's actually saying, look, there appears to be a bit of monkey business here. Sending it back, what does that mean? It can pass, if nothing is done within 14 days and so on. Help us understand, okay, so the bill has been sent back to Parliament with recommendations to scrap off all the clauses in totality, and the National Assembly Speaker has received it, acknowledged it. What next? Help us understand what next. Kenyans need to know what next after this. What does this mean? Is the bill out on a technicality, or is it going to come back? Talk to us a little bit about that.
This is the third of 3 bills introduced in the past years, including the housing bill that was there last year that was also its own animal, but this, I guess, was the nail that broke the camel's back. there is a bill that went through the House and was assented. All that is left now is a signature that signs this bill into law. If this bill is not signed into law within 21 days of today, or of the day it was passed, that is, it then goes and automatically becomes a law. This bill has to be returned to Parliament and during a parliamentary session withdrawn. And Parliament, it seems, unless a special sitting is called within the 21-day period, this bill still becomes law. That is very clear. And I feel like, pardon my senior over here, we are missing the message of what happened this week and last week.
What is the message from where you sit?
The past 2 years, the president has tried to push his agenda by raising taxes. And all that everyone is trying to pass across as clearly as possible, that keeps bringing us back to this watershed moment, is increase the tax base. The tax base is the people who work. The more people who work, the more people can provide to themselves, to their family, to their country, to their government. There is no one working since the pandemic. We people who are lawyers and doctors are now DJs on TV doing their mixes like Grouchy and the rest. People who were in different careers had to reorganize themselves from the top way down to the bottom. This is a reorganized tax base, and it is much smaller than it was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, everyone was moving. The country was a star. It was channeling money in, money out. At this juncture, we need the government to understand that the tax base, the people who need to be at work are not working. That is why there is such a number unseen before in this country, able to hit 35 counties in one afternoon. Not because they are not busy, because they are not busy, right? These people need to go back to work. So the agenda of the Kenya Kwanza government needs to change. He's already at the halfway point of his first term. If he continues trying to tax the few of us who are there, who can pay taxes, we will pay 3/4 of our money, but 3/4 of the population will not live on us. The other 3/4 of the population need to be recovered from the 2020, 2021, and 2022 chaos, put back into a system of what, this was the hustler movement. This was the message. Let's get back to work. That work has never appeared. And that is why when you say tax us, we have nothing to tax. We have nothing to give. We cannot give. Give us something to do. We make something small, we give you what we have. We don't have it now. And the more you ask us to go and discuss a finance bill that raises taxes, it forgets the entire side of the population who are already below the poverty line. Kenya has had a poverty line issue, the whole of the time the country has existed. Can you imagine what that poverty line issue became now once the whole country had to go home at 3 p.m.? That is the problem.
All right, Mr. Mugaka and Mr. Hamasi, here's a question. Some of the questions that are also coming in. Here's a question. Where do we go from here? I believe all of us were watching the scenes in Parliament. All of us were watching when the reports of the deaths started coming in. All of us watched the first speech and the second speech and the Deputy President's speech. All of us have seen the protests and the demos today. We've seen the young person in Ongata Rongai who just lost their lives, and a body pumped full of bullets. We've also seen the calls for action. We've seen calls for peace. We've seen calls for dialogue and calls for all manner of solutions and approaches. From where you sit, gentlemen, which way Kenya? Which way do we go from here? Mr. Hamasi.
Thank you so much, Victor. Which way Kenya? I'll start by just describing what leadership is. To us, leadership is a critical calling, Victor. And as a country, the leaders that we have, they should note that that responsibility is bestowed on them by our God and the people who vote. Therefore, in everything they do, they need to be very careful and act with utmost selflessness as they execute the mandate that has been given upon them. The president has stretched a hand of dialogue. The young people have pushed their agenda forward and they have made their voice heard. So as a country, how do we move forward? The president should honor his word of dialogue. Engage everyone. And this boils down to public participation. In this country, public participation is enshrined in our constitution. But do we genuinely do public participation in this country? Because if we genuinely do public participation, then whatever has happened in this country will not be there. And who is mandated with this public participation? It is the parliament, the people's representative. Do they do it genuinely? They don't. And for me, where I sit as a Kenyan and as a leadership person, I feel like as a nation, moving forward, let us take seriousness the part of public participation that is enshrined in our constitution, Victor, because not only at that point is as a country we are going to forge forward with inclusivity. Because what we have seen, it is not the older people who have gone to the streets, it is the young people. And yes, honestly speaking, the young people have been avoided or have been excluded at the table where decisions are made in this country. So not yesterday. Moving forward is, as a government of Kenya Kwanza, I believe the president listens, and moving forward, let him reconstitute the government and include young people in these particular spaces.
On that point,
yes.
On that point, and I want you to jump in on this after you finish your response to this. There are a number of suggestions, a number of demands that have been put forward.
Yes.
One of them is that the president needs to actually do away with Parliament, dissolve it completely, constitute the IEBC and enable the recall of some, first of all, reconstitute the IEBC, enable recalling of members of Parliament, but also there are other calls for just complete scrapping of this entire leadership. Where do you stand on this?
Victor, on that one, I'll be a bit objective. As a country where we are we able to go to an election right now? Not possible. What is the quality thing that is supposed to be done? And I like the suggestions. Yes, the president to constitute the IEBC. We cannot have an IEBC appointed in the next 1 month and we have an election in the next 3 months. It is not possible. The infrastructure needed is not a walk in the park. So there are things that are possible and there are things that are not possible. So as a country, I believe the object of recalling, we also need to look at the visibility of this particular proposal that we have, Victor. Because honestly, right now, a country needs a parliament that is objective. We are in a state as a country where if we don't have legislations being passed that are pro-people, where are we going to go as a country? You break the parliament. Then what? Does that solve the real problem? It doesn't solve the real problem. So what we need to do as a nation, let us go into a rethinking mode. Let us reevaluate ourselves. Let us reevaluate how we pick our leaders, how we elect them. And then 2027, use your vote to make the right decision, not at this moment.
Mr. Mugaka, he believes that's the way forward. Where do you stand on this? Some of the proposals by some of the protesters are what I've said before. Scrap the entire government, let's start afresh. Which way Kenya, from where you said?
President Ruto is not one man. He is his advisors. He is the people he surrounds himself with. He is the people he consults before he speaks. If he has been doing so on his own, as he did when he called young Kenyans criminals who are treasonous, and then changed tune within 15 hours and told them our sons and our daughters, the circle that he is with must change. Those people don't know us. Clearly, there is a connect between government and people. The person who is on the street who sells me a tomato and the person who wields power at the top must be able to feel each other. We have felt every president since independence, and we will always be able to connect with our leaders. There is a problem and the buck stops with him. He gets to decide who and who doesn't. President Ruto is not a monolith. He was a young Turk. He was a man from the street. He knows what these problems are. There is blood on every street in Nairobi and other parts of this country. Empathy should have been the first reaction. Whoever advised him to go and attack as a form of defense failed. Failed him,
so
failed everyone.
You think we need, the president needs
our leaders
different advisors
need to stop everything that they're doing now and listen. Respond with empathy to the people who keep saying the same things repetitively. Have a prayer breakfast. Say, we are sorry this happened. Extrajudicial killings have occurred. This is primary to us. The young children who were killed on the street in Rongai, in town, in Narok, in Eldoret, this needs to be addressed immediately. The protests need to be reformed and returned to be peaceful. He should allow picketing. The conversation that he has said has begun. He should protect it and make sure it's allowed to continue. People being heard by their leaders, allow those leaders the will to rule. That is number one, sovereignty of the people. The will of the people gives them the right to rule. And if the president continues reacting to whatever is happening on the street instead of being proactive and foreseeing whatever we are going to do, because right now we are finished with this week. What happens next Tuesday? No one is discussing. No one knows. The military will not be in town forever. We will come back. We will not come back. This depends on who is talking to us and how they are communicating to us. And if it is the way they have been doing so, expect the same result. It is insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different.
All right. Now, gentlemen, we need to, this is a massive conversation. We only have so much time to deal with this. But I would like both of you to formulate a message to the country, a message to the leaders, a message to the people that are out there, each of you separately. As you craft that, let me just read some of the comments that have come in. Christopher Joga, you're watching from Kabete, thank you so much. Someone says, Lawyer Hamasi, you say the president was not at fault because the document was not in his table. Stop giving us... That's Emmy. Emmy's really, really upset with you as we try to wind up. Somebody called Juicy says, well, the government is pointing fingers at each other. And are you sure about the independence of the parliament? We need to dissolve it. These are the views of some of the people. Dr. Ralph Mwai says, do we need to wait for people to die so we can talk about things? We should have opportunities for youth delegates. Dr. Ralph Mwai. Brian from Keroka says the president needs to withdraw the bill. Well, he has. We don't have jobs, which is what you were saying, Mr. Mogaka. Somebody else here by the name of Mureithi says, what next? I believe, Mureithi, your question has been answered. And Jerry from Kitengela says, I think your question about the bill turning into law after 21 days has been responded to. And he says, Jerry says, I mean, if this happens, if it automatically turns into law, the Gen Z will be back on the streets harder, fiercer than ever. That's Jerry from Kitengela. And finally, I mean, they're coming in quick and fast. Robert Obaha, you say the deployment of KDF was the biggest mistake. Robert from Kakamega. And Kefa from Kitengela is asking, why is it taking so long to reform the IEBC? Anyway, good people, the questions are many, the points are many. It's a massive conversation, one that will continue to be discussed even for decades to come. This is one for the history books. But for this moment, this juncture, gentlemen, what's your message in brief, concise? That's your camera. What's your message to the people, to the leadership, and to those who are watching right now? That's your camera. Real quick, Mr. Mogaka.
To all the Gen Zs, Gen X, Gen Ys, Gen Alphas, and everyone else, to our leaders and to the young people, Kenya loves you, and you love Kenya. Kenya has moved past more than this, bigger than this. We've battled colonialism, coups, we have battled single democracy to multi-democracies. We have built highways, superhighways, SGRs. We have invited millions of white people, and we will invite millions more. Kenya is always going to be bigger than its problems, and we should know that we will triumph over this problem as well. Kenya will always overcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mogaka. Mr. Khamasi, there's your camera. Message to the people.
Dear Kenyans, we only have one country called Kenya. We have all our freedoms and rights enshrined in our constitution. How we exercise them determines how productive they will be. For as a country, the young generation, including myself, we have expressed ourselves through the protests. The leadership of the country has listened to us. Let us give dialogue an opportunity. And those taking advantage of the situation, just know that your days are numbered. And at the right time, those who did right will be judged right, and those who did wrong will be judged wrong. Let us focus on rebuilding a nation. We can no longer sustain protests every single day. Thank you.
All right, good people. We would like to take a break on this conversation. Like we said, it's a massive conversation happening all across the country. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. Can't thank you enough. Asanteni sana. And thank you for your insights tonight. Good people of Kenya, as you go to bed tonight or wherever it is you're going tonight, may God bless you, may God keep you, and may you stay in peace even as we find our way forward for our country and our people. My name is Victor Muyakane. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to present this news to you tonight. Good night.